In the fall of 1347, 12 ships sailed into the harbor of Messina, Sicily. Most of the sailors aboard were already dead. The few still alive were covered in black boils, delirious with fever. The ships were sent back out to sea, but it didn't matter. What they carried had already reached the shore. Within 5 years, this outbreak would kill an estimated 50 million people, a third to half of Europe's population. But it didn't just kill people. It broke feudalism, reshaped religion, and arguably helped set the stage for the Renaissance. This is how the worst catastrophe in recorded history accidentally rebuilt civilization. The Black Death. The outbreak. The culprit was a bacterium called Yersinia pestis, carried by fleas living on black rats that traveled everywhere along the Silk Road, the trade network linking China, Central Asia, the Middle East, and Europe. The outbreak likely began in Central Asia in the early 1340s, moved west with merchant caravans, hit the Crimean port of Kaffa, then jumped onto Genoese trading ships bound for Constantinople, Sicily, and the rest of Europe. It struck in 3 forms: bubonic, marked by the swollen black lymph nodes that gave the disease its name, septicemic, which poisoned the blood and could kill within a day, and pneumonic, which spread through the air and was the deadliest of all. In the worst-hit cities, like Florence, mortality reached 50 to 60%. Ships were found drifting at sea with no one left alive to sail them. Nobody understood germs. The question people were really asking wasn't, "What is this?" It was, "Why is God doing this to us?" Panic and response. With no concept of bacteria, people reached for astrology, sin, and conspiracy. Physicians blamed bad planetary alignments. Others blamed bad air, which is why plague doctors wore that beaked mask stuffed with dried herbs. Wrong science, but it kept some physical distance from the sick. Flagellants marched town to town whipping themselves bloody, hoping visible penance would lift the plague, and likely spread it faster instead. Far darker, panicked mobs in cities across Europe blamed Jewish communities for poisoning wells, leading to horrific pogroms, even though Jewish communities were dying at the same rates as everyone else. One idea actually worked, and it's still with us: quarantine, from the Venetian 40 giorni, 40 days, the wait time imposed on incoming ships before anyone could come ashore. The economic earthquake. Here's where tragedy turns into transformation. Before the plague, labor was cheap and land was scarce, lords held all the leverage, and peasants were often tied to the land as serfs. After the plague, that math flipped. Labor was suddenly scarce and land abundant. Survivors realized they had leverage for the first time in generations. They could demand higher wages, or simply leave for a lord who paid better. Landowners fought back. England's Statute of Labourers in 1351 tried to legally cap wages and force people to stay put. It mostly failed. There weren't enough workers left to enforce it against. That tension between peasants pushing for freedom and elites clinging to the old order helped fuel England's Peasants' Revolt in 1381. Across Western Europe, the Black Death accelerated the slow death of serfdom itself. Religion, culture, and the unexpected spark for progress. The Church had promised protection from divine punishment. But priests died at the same rate as everyone else, in some places, faster, since their duties put them close to the dying. If prayer couldn't save the faithful, what was the Church really offering? It didn't destroy Christianity in Europe, but it chipped away at the Church's authority, feeding into challenges that culminated a century later in the Reformation. Art absorbed the trauma too. This era produced the danse macabre, the dance of death, skeletons leading kings and peasants alike toward the grave. Death, the art insisted, didn't care about rank. In a society built entirely around rank, that was a radical idea. And here's the twist: this catastrophe may have helped set up the Renaissance. Wealth concentrated among fewer surviving heirs. Labor shortages pushed people toward labor-saving techniques and a more experimental mindset. And survivors of mass death on this scale came out asking bigger questions about mortality and the human condition, questions that would define Renaissance art and philosophy. The plague didn't cause the Renaissance alone. Historians debate how much weight to give it. but most agree it was a real thread in the larger tapestry. The plague's first wave ended around 1351, but it returned in smaller waves for 400 more years. Its fingerprints are still on the modern world: quarantine, public health record keeping, shifts in labor rights, and changes in wealth distribution all trace back to this single event. It's a strange lesson: the Black Death didn't teach the world anything gently. It forced change through sheer brutal necessity, and cracked open a version of Europe that had been frozen in place for centuries. If you want more deep dives like this, subscribe, and let me know in the comments what historical event deserves this treatment next.